So hello everybody, it's so good to see you. You're welcome to my channel once again. I'm so delighted I missed all of you. We are going to have a very interesting topic today. It's the Biorisk Management series, and I know that you are going to enjoy it. So wait and enjoy the lecture. So like I said, we are going to be doing biorisk mitigation strategies, and I remain Dr. Iya Eze Basi, and this is the biorisk management series. So, fun facts. Do you know that you blink as fast as 20,000 times every day? And this corresponds to about 15 times each minute or once every 4 seconds. But why? It's nature's way of keeping our eyes lubricated and cleansing them of every irritating particle. And this is kind of like a biorisk strategy against getting blind. Isn't God great? So, what did you do to protect yourself today? Our lesson objectives, well, I believe at the end of this lecture, you should be able to understand the role of mitigation in AMP model for biorisk management. I would expect you should be able to define mitigation and appreciate that mitigation must be based on a thorough risk assessment. You should be able to also list the categories of control measures and describe the hierarchy of controls. You should also be able to understand the advantages and limitation of each type of biorisk mitigation measure. So this is our channel, and I want to thank you so much. We have 2.4 thousand subscribers. Yay! And it's all due to your support. You are really my MVPs. I'm so happy. So please, if you have not liked, you have not shared, you have not subscribed to our channel, you have not commented on our videos, please, I would encourage you to do so. Help us to keep this resource free. So we get back to biorisk management, and the model we use is the AMP model, that is the Assessment Mitigation Performance Model. I would like us to really remind ourselves what this is all about. Assessment talks about the process of identifying the hazards, you evaluate the risk associated with them, and you take into account the adequacy of any existing controls and decide whether or not the risks are acceptable. Then mitigation has to do with your actions, your control measures that you put in place to reduce or eliminate the risk as associated with biological agents and toxins. While performance has to talk about the implementation of the entire biorisk management system, you evaluate and you ensure that the system is working the way it was designed. And also you keep looking for how to continually improve the system. So why is it important for you to carry out a biorisk assessment before choosing a mitigation control measure? And what do you think will happen if you do not do a risk assessment before choosing a control measure? What do you expect would happen if you choose to do a risk assessment before you do a mitigation control measure? All these we will discuss as time goes. So, why do we do a risk assessment? Number one, you do not want to waste resources, on dealing with things that are not risk. For instance, how many bullets will you use to kill one mosquitoes? How many then would you use to kill 1 billion mosquitoes? You don't want to waste resources. And we want to have a situation where we can select the right mitigation. For instance, this other person covered himself with cloth, and you can still see that because the cloth is a very light cloth, the mosquitoes are still biting the person. So you want to select the right mitigation. And not just the right mitigation, you don't want to just take care of one type of risk. You want to take care of all the risk and address each of those risks appropriately according to the risks that the organism poses to the humans or animal health. So that is why it is necessary to do a risk assessment. Also, if you don't do a risk assessment, some of the risks may go unaddressed, while other mitigation controls may be inappropriately restrictive. And it's better, you have better safety when all the hazards are identified in the assessment and addressed to mitigation. You have more impact, you have more efficiency, you have more control. And then also, if you do not do a risk assessment, some risks may go unrecognized. All right. And then if they are recognized, you will not be able to do a mitigation against them and they still pose a risk. So the process of risk assessment is meant to identify all the risks that need to be addressed. All right. And you should also note that your mitigation measures address both safety and biosecurity. All right. Okay. So if you had to do a research with very dangerous virus and you're using mice models, what kind of risk mitigation measures would you use? For me, you may choose some other measures, but for me, I would make sure that I treat the culture supernatant with bleach before I dispose of it, or I autoclave it at very high temperature before I dispose of it. Also, I would make sure I'm wearing the appropriate personal protective equipment. And I wouldn't just work with the virus or the mice anywhere. I would have to make sure it is in a biosafety cabinet. And before I start working with that virus, I will make sure I'm immunized against that virus before I start working with it, because anything can happen and I need to be protected. Other things I would do would be controlled access. Like I said in my former videos, not everyone should have access to the lab. Only authorized personnel should have access to the lab. I would make sure that if I am working, when I finish with my sharps include the razor blade, surgical blades, needles, and so on and so forth. I will dispose of them in the appropriate container before I discard it. And then I would make sure that all the waste, the beddings, the carcasses, the organs that come out from that mouse or mice models have to be autoclaved before they are disposed, so that we can protect both ourselves and our communities. All right. So having said that, all these things I have talked about are all called mitigation control measures. And there are actually 5 major categories of measures for controlling biological risk in the laboratory. They include elimination and substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, practices and procedures, as well as personal protective equipment. So looking at each one, what is elimination or substitution? Just like the name says, is either you remove the hazard or you don't work with that agent, or you replace it with something less dangerous or something not dangerous at all, but still has the same characteristics with the very virulent pathogens. All right. So substitution means that you either work with a less pathogenic strain of the organism, or you work with a less pathogenic organism that behaves similarly to the organism in question. Elimination means that you restrict the work with that pathogenic organism to certain specially designed facilities, not everywhere. But also you could choose not to even work with that strain of organism. You choose a non-pathogenic strain of the organism that doesn't have those pathogenic characteristics, but have similarities with the pathogenic one. For instance, instead of working with Shiga toxin producing E. coli tech, you could choose to work with the non-pathogenic E. coli, all right? So you work with a non-pathogenic organism that behaves similarly to the organism in question. All right, the next one is engineering controls, and it has to do with the physical changes to workstations, your equipment, materials that you use, production facilities, or any other relevant aspect of the work environment that reduces or prevents exposure to hazard. You can see this person is working in a biosafety cabinet. It's not biosafety cabinet. The the design of it is done in such a way that it minimizes exposure both to the person and to outside. Examples of generic controls will include your laboratory chemical hoods. I showed you that, your biosafety cabinets, your laminar flow so clean benches, your gas cabinets, your machine guarding, your non-porous, easily clean surface. You can see how that surface was sparkling. Your interlocked doors that can control laboratory access, your hands-free sinks that can reduce inadvertent exposures to infectious agents or toxins, and directional air handling systems that filter air in the laboratory. Then you now have administrative controls. This has to do with policies and procedures that result in giving proper guidance for safe laboratory work practices and set the standard for behavior within the laboratory. Once developed, administrative controls must be implemented and adhered to by all working personnel in the laboratory. These examples include training on the job. You are training on job-related hazards during initial assignments. You're providing for medical surveillance. You're giving vaccinations, fit testing, equipment testing, appropriate selection and availability of PPE. You train and educate about the proper use of disposal of PPE and the things that you're working with. You pre-screen patients for aerosol transmissible diseases before you work with them. You adjust work schedules to avoid fatigue and burnout. Display warning signs for potential hazards, like if they are bloodborne pathogens or lasers. You identify and label dedicated area for biohazardous waste and contaminated liquid storage. Want to make sure that 247 there is availability of written health and safety policies and procedural manuals. Want to also make sure that 247 there is availability of a written inventory of all the hazardous chemicals you have. You need to have your safety data sheets and your secondary labels also. Okay, you want to also have a hazard communication standard, which helps the workers to understand the kind of risk they are exposed to in the environment where they are working. The next control measures will be our practices and procedures. These are processes, activities that have been shown over time to be effective in reducing risk, like hand washing, cleaning of surfaces, disposal of sharps, and all that. So examples include hand hygiene, disinfecting work surfaces, like I've said, to contaminate after spills. You use procedures that minimize risk. You identify dedicated areas for food and drink storage. You don't store food and drinks with such contaminated material. How to transport those materials so that you avoid spills. And then if there are spills, how to use spill kits. All right. Then finally, you now have your personal protective equipment, and these are devices that are worn by the workers to protect against hazard in the laboratory. So your personal protective equipment, that's your PPE, is your last line of defense, and actually is the least safest of all the methods I've mentioned. All right. So examples of personal protective equipment by body areas. Your eyes, you use safety glasses, you use goggles. These are protective eyewear. For your ears, you use earplugs or muff. For your face, you actually use a face shield. For your hands, you have your exam gloves, your chemotherapy gloves. For your feet, you have your shoe covering your boots. For your thighs, so that's your body parts, you have fluid-resistant gowns and all that. For your lungs and respiratory tract, you have your N95 filtering face paint respirators and other kinds of respirators and protective shields and barriers. All right. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of using each of these methods? Let's see. For elimination or substitution, an advantage would be that you are reducing risk immediately because you are not working with an organism that is dangerous as the organism you wanted to use, or you are limiting the use of the dangerous organism by working in designated facilities. A disadvantage of that method is that it's not always possible for you to find a look-alike of an organism or pathogenic, non-pathogenic look-alike of an organism. So, and sometimes you will find out that because of that difference, there may be differences in the details of the system that you are using. For engineering, engineering is efficient, it eliminates hazard. You don't have to be involved as a lab worker, it's just there to protect you. But on the other hand, it is costly, it is complex, you need to maintain it regularly. If not, you're giving yourself a false sense of security. So for the administrative one, it has a kind of like authority approach, do this, and you don't have lab-specific issues being addressed. Okay, so the disadvantage is that because of the indirect approach, it primarily addresses just the human factor. And sometimes you have these administrators not being people that are actually working in the lab, so they may not even understand what you're doing. So they may not come and choose methods, controls that are cumbersome, that are hard to follow. And, when things are like that, people may not want to follow such instructions. All right. So for practices and procedures, these are SOP based, all right, and they address the needs of the individual labs. Okay. But a disadvantage is that it needs training and supervision, and it needs to be developed for each lab. And you need somebody to be there to ensure that those practices and procedures are carried out. All right. For the PPE, it's easy to use, it's cheap, and you have various levels of protection available, but it does not eliminate the hazard. The hazard is still there. So if somebody does not use the PPE, exposure still will happen. Or if your PPE at any point fails, exposure will happen. Usually PPE, some people find it uncomfortable to wear those things all day long. So they may not want to wear a goggle, shield, face shields. They may not want to wear eye goggles and all that. So if it is not used, you have a high failure rate, and it can only protect the user. It doesn't protect the around. I see somebody after using PPE, you are using your hand to open doors that other people who are not even using PPE will open. So you're protecting yourself, you're not protecting everybody. All right, so this brings us to the question of hierarchy of controls. You would find out that the top ranking ones are much more effective than the lower ranking ones. So going from elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, your practices and procedures, and your PPE, you will find out that the PPE is least effective while the elimination substitution is most effective. All right? So let's have some fun again. Did you know that it's safer driving in a car than on a motorcycle? Someone will say, no, no, no. Why? Let's look at this. Do you see this? You will find out that the car safety is all about the engineering system. All right? It's like saying, let's compare a bulldog to this chihuahua. For car safety measures, you have things like airbags, you have seatbelts, you have your automatic braking systems, you have your traction control, you have your brake assist. And if all that fails, you still have a 1,000 kg steel cage protecting you. Meanwhile, for the motorcycle, you just hold on, make sure you don't fall off. All right? It's all about PPE. Your helmet, your jacket, how much can that protect you? All right? So when you have an accident using a motorcycle, you just hold on, and it's you and your God. Let God just help you. So you can see that the car safety is actually better than the motorcycle safety. The car is able to protect multiple people, while the motorcycle, the PPE you're wearing just protects you, yourself, and any other person is on his own. All right? So First and foremost, your car offers more protection than your motorcycles because, like I have said, the occupants in the car are surrounded by a steel frame, you have airbags, other features, and because of that, it's able to protect multiple people. In contrast, the motorcycle riders are much more exposed. They are vulnerable to injury in case of an accident, and then their PPE can only protect one person at a time. All right. So, knowing all that you know after showing you car safety and motorcycle safety, I want you to do something for me and write it down in the comment section. I want you to do a risk assessment for me and tell me which is safer. Do you think driving a car is safer, or do you think driving a motorcycle is safer? There is no correct answer. What I need to use is do me a risk assessment and tell me from your assessment if you feel motorcycle is safer or the car is safer, and give me your reasons for that. Put it in the comment section. I will be waiting. I will be watching for it. All right. So fun time. We are going to watch a very short but interesting video. All right. And after watching that video, I would like you to be able to identify some mitigation controls in that video. All right. I want you to identify as many as you can, write them also in the comment section. Then organize these measures under each of the 5 different categories of controls that we have there. All right. And let me know what you think.
Wazowski, nice job. Those numbers are pretty sweet.
Are they? I hadn't even noticed. And how is Georgie doing?
He's doing great. I love working with that big guy.
Keep the doors coming, Charlie. I'm on a roll today.
George and I are like brothers. 2319! We have a 2319!
Red alert.
George Sanderson, please remain motionless. Prepare for decontamination.
Duck and cover, people!
Oh, not the CDA.
Coming through, please. Inside, clear the contaminated area. Into the 2319 in progress. The area clear. Coming through. Watch yourself. Stand back. Careful. All clear. Situation is 990. Ready for decon.
Hey, thanks, guys. That was a close one.
Okay.
Okay, people, take a break. We gotta shut down for a half hour and reset the system.
An entire scare floor out of commission. What else can go wrong?
Okay. So, having watched the video, I am sure that you have seen different types. I'm sure you've seen the administrative controls, you've seen the PPE, you've seen access controls also. Did you see that? So please put it down in your comments. And when you have done that, I want you to look at these practice questions. No pressure, it's just to help you. So number 1 is, what are the categories of risk mitigation strategies that we have learned in this video, and how does the risk assessment inform your choice of which categories to use? All right. So why is it important to know the advantages and disadvantages of each category? And lastly, what is the one thing that you will add or do differently in your work based on the information on these risk mitigation strategies? All right. So revise that. Put it also in the comment section. I would like to see that. Having come to the end, I want to say thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. God bless you, and bye. Thank you very much.